This is the Voice for Real Estate podcast. Whether you're buying a home, building a home, or designing a home, you'll meet the local experts who can provide all the information you need in every episode of Voice for Real Estate. And be sure to subscribe, share, and comment so you don't miss a single episode of Voice for Real Estate.
Here we are for the latest episode of Voice for Real Estate. And I got to tell y'all, this is one of my favorite ones to do the whole year. You get a chance to talk to Doug Holmes. And Doug, you've got so many things inside your head, man. For those that don't know who Doug is, he crunches and studies statistics in many fashions, but also with MLS in Charleston. You crunch these numbers, Doug, so you got some great information. If you don't mind, man, because I really respect your knowledge base with all the statistics, let's talk about inflation. That seems to be on everybody's mind. Can you tell us through your eyes what that means and how it's affecting us?
A big part of buying a home is how much you can borrow the money for. And that's your mortgage rate. And that has a lot of effect on what you can afford. And so there's a little known statistic, most realtors know it, that a 1% change in the interest rate will drop your purchasing power by 10%. And so in the past year, we have seen interest rates go from 3% to 6%. So that's a 3% change in interest rates. And so we've lost about 30% in buying power for the buyer. So the Fed has been trying to curb inflation, and they've been trying, in order to do that, they've been raising interest rates 7 times in 2022, and a lot of those most of them were 0.75 of a point each. So we've seen a vast change in the interest rates and the mortgage rates, and that has a big effect on buyers.
What was the interest rate when it started, when they changed it the first time? Do you recall?
Sometime early in the year, mortgage rates were around 3%. So the mortgage rate is not exactly the same as the Fed rate, but it's related. So when the Fed changes the amount that they charge other banks to borrow money from them, the mortgage industry has to change their rates too. So the mortgage rate, which is what is relevant to real estate, was around 3%. You could get a 30-year loan for around 3% at the beginning of the year, but now it's 6.5%, and it's going to go up because the Fed has announced that, what they've done so far has not been enough. Consumer spending is still high. It's all supply and demand. And with consumer spending as high as it is, the Fed says, we have to keep raising rates in 2023. So we're going to see a continuation of this. I mean, I think it's possible that we might see 10% mortgage rates by the end of 2023. There's just been no softening in consumer demand and consumer spending, and there has to be.
Let's talk about how this has been impactful on the real estate industry in and around the Charleston area, which is a major part, obviously, of the coastal Carolinas. From 2021 versus 2022, give us some facts of the decreases in transactions and what that looks like.
So in 2021, we had a record number of sales for our Charleston MLS, the Tri-County area of Charleston. We sold about a little over 23,000 homes, condos, homes in the Charleston area in 2021, 23,000. Well, this year it's going to be under 2022, is slightly under 19,000. So that's about a 19% drop.
Have you seen so you got a good handle on a decade and more, actually. So have you seen that kind of drop before?
No, not really. It's been a while. We had pretty good production even through the horrible times in 2008, 9, 10, and 11. We still had relatively good sales. We had a ton of inventory. We had 10,000 homes for sale, and we were selling 8,000 or 9,000 a year. And every year after that, it continued to go up from 8,000 or 9,000, 10,000 a year sales to 12, 13, 14, 15,000, and then 17, 18, 19,000. And then last year we hit 23,000. So we've been going up pretty steady for quite a while now, for a decade. And so this is the first year that we've had a drop off. But last year, 2021, was a record, not by a little bit. It was a record by a lot. We had sold, I think, 21,000 the year before. So going from 21,000 to 23,000, that was a huge increase in sales in 2021. And so this year has been a pullback from that.
This message is exclusively for realtors. Knowledge is power. Your subscription to Charleston Real Estate Stats will give you the knowledge you'll need to have a powerful grasp on the marketing conditions. Doug Holmes, known as the Stats Guy, is a statistical consultant with a passion for delivering his subscribers the best statistics available pertaining to the Charleston MLS. Whether your customers are buyers or sellers, this is valuable information they need to know. It's a great investment at just $12 per month for a weekly report on all Charleston home sales. Visit charlestonrealestatestats.com, that's charlestonrealestatestats.com, to sign up for your weekly report from Doug Holmes.
You're listening to the Voice for Real Estate podcast, a conversation about coastal Carolina real estate.
Let's go ahead and drill down, Doug. If you don't mind, let's start up in Moncks Corner. What kind of sales do we have in Moncks Corner, and how much did we lose in Moncks Corner this year versus 2021?
Well, similar. I mean, there are a lot of MLS areas in Goose Creek and Moncks Corner and Somerville. That has been a hot spot of sales because there's a ton of new construction up there, and people can still live close to Charleston for $300,000, $400,000.
What percentage of the sales were new construction this past year? Do you know off the top of your head?
About 22%, I think, of the sales were, but right now, 52% of what's under contract is new construction, over half of what's under contract.
So would that make us believe that 2023, there's going to be an abundance of new construction? The last quarter of this year shows that impactful for new construction. Will that carry into 2023?
I don't know. It's hard to say. It's always hard to predict what the new construction people would do. Sometimes they seem to kind of lag in their awareness of what's going on. But I think part of it is the fact that the buyer can't find a pre-owned house. The supply is not there. The supply chain has had a lot to do with not only inflation, the fact that people can't get things, lack of supply keeps prices high and keeps demand high. And that has been true for real estate as well. We have a lack of supply. Back in the 2010, 11, 12 era, we had 10,000 homes for sale. Early in 2022, we had less than 1,000 homes on the Charleston MLS for sale. Now we have gone up to 2,800 now, which is more reasonable. But when you're selling 19,000 homes a year and you only have 2,800 homes for sale, that's still a seller's market. A seller is still got the advantage there. 2 months of inventory is still a seller's market. 6 months of inventory is a balanced market. So we're still in a seller's market. So that means that prices are still supposed to go up, and the demand is still there.
So getting back to the region up there where we talked about new construction, Moncks Corner, Somerville, and Goose Creek.
Well, the actual Moncks Corner area itself saw a 31% decrease in the number of transactions.
What about increase in price?
A little bit, 12% increase in price, whereas the overall MLS saw a 14% increase in price.
Where's the largest market in the Tri-County area for increase in price?
If we look at the two Mount Pleasant areas, they went up about 20 to 25% in price, while they went down 25% and 34%. There are two MLS areas in Mount Pleasant, and so they both decreased around 25 to 30% in transactions, while going up in price by about 25%.
Is that uncommon for the amount of sales to go down, but the prices to go up, but the transactions to go down?
Well, I think part of it's related. I think we've gotten to the point where price is so high that and the mortgage rates are so high that the buyer can't keep buying. So that has reduced transactions. The demand has slowed down a bit. It was very high at the beginning of the year. But through the middle of the year, when the Fed started raising rates, that's when the demand started going down.
Every year that you crunch these numbers and that you've been doing this, there's always something that's very unique that sticks out in your mind a year after year, whatever that is. When you look at 2022, what rises in your mind that is really so different from the previous years?
The fact that it was, the year was kind of split in half. The first part of the year was very much like 2021. In fact, that there was a lot of demand. The demand was still very high and the mortgage rates were still very low. So sometime in the spring, the Fed started raising rates, but they can only raise rates so much at a time. So it took a little while, several rate changes throughout the year until near the end of the year in the fall, late summer and the fall, the buyers began to get it. I mean, the prices were way up and the mortgage rates were rising and the two just didn't go together. And so the buyers started slowing down their demand. So we've only seen demand starting to decrease a little bit in the second half of the year. So the biggest thing about 2022 was the Fed raising the rates.
Let's break it down to, since we're over in Mount Pleasant, Sullivan's Island. That is an incredible market, is it not?
It is an incredible market. The prices over there have skyrocketed. I think 27% increase this year in price. The median price of a home in Sullivan's Island is over $3.5 million.
That's crazy.
You can't hardly get anything over there for less than a couple of million.
Since we're over in the islands, tell us a little bit about Isle of Palms.
Very similar to Sullivan's Island, the prices dropped, the number of transactions dropped over there over 40% from 2021. Over 40% drop in the number of transactions. While the prices went up 27% on Sullivan's Island and 7% on the Isle of Palms. So the Isle of Palms did not see quite as much price inflation as Sullivan's Island did.
Let's go take our listeners to Wild Dunes.
Wild Dunes saw a drop in transactions, but not as steep as Sullivan's Island and the Isle of Palms. It was about a 24% drop in transactions on Wild Dunes. And the price there went up about 14%, which is somewhere in between the Isle of Palms and Sullivan's Island.
So Wild Dunes is kind of a bright spot over there. They had considerably less volume, 20% less than Isle of Palms had, almost 20% less.
As far as the drop in transactions, they had a drop in transactions, but it wasn't as bad as Sullivan's Island.
But they almost had a double in the values versus Isle of Palms.
Well, they did have a bigger percentage increase than the Isle of Palms, yeah.
Let's go. Let's move over to DeWeese.
Well, not much goes on there. There are hardly ever any transactions over there. In 2021, there were actually 11 transactions on DeWeese Island, which was a lot. This year, we had none.
Let's go over to Daniel Island.
Daniel Island has been doing really well the last few years, but this year they dropped 40% in the number of transactions. They had almost 500 transactions in 2021. They had less than 300 transactions in 2022, so a 40% drop in transactions, but they did see a 22% jump in price.
Please explain that a little bit. I'm sorry for the ignorance here. I'm the host here, but I just don't understand. The volumes the amount of value of the property is going up substantially. How is that happening? Why is that happening?
Well, it's still because the supply is less than the demand. There's still enough demand. There was throughout the year. You got to understand that 2022 was a weird year. The first half, there was a ton of demand. And that demand stayed high, but slowly slackened throughout the year. So the demand was there. I mean, selling 19,000 homes is not selling 23,000 homes, but it's probably like the second or third best. Well, it's about the third or fourth best year we've ever had.
So wait a minute, you're saying in the down market we've experienced at least the last half of this year, we still had the third most transactions ever in the MLS?
I think it's about the third. I think it's about the third or fourth best year we've ever had.
Wow.
So we've dropped a lot, but there's still a lot of demand and very little supply. We had less than 1,000 homes to sell in the MLS, and I had never seen anywhere near that number. I mean, usually from 2015 to 2019, we had 5,000 homes to sell. On any given day, you could go into the MLS and you could find 5,000 homes to sell. And that went on from 2015 to 2019, and those were all good years. Prices were going up, transactions were going up, and we had 5,000 homes for sale. And so in 2021, we sold 23,000 homes, and by 2022, we're left with almost no homes to sell, 1,000. And so that supply had a huge effect on the price because the demand was still there. People still wanted to buy houses when interest rates early in the spring were still under 4%. They weren't 3%, but they were still under 4%. And so there was still a huge demand to buy houses at those ridiculous rates.
You know, Doug, it still goes down to the old adage with real estate: location, location, location. We're just blessed we live where we live, because if we didn't, we wouldn't see these numbers. Let's take a trip over to the peninsula. Why don't you dive in there and let us know what that looks like?
The peninsula of Charleston is broken into two MLS areas in our MLS, and one is below the connector and one is above the connector. So south of Broad, think of that, south of Broad. South of the connector is more expensive. Those are generally $1 million homes and much, much more as you get closer and closer to south of Broad. But the other side of the connector has done really well over the past few years as well. In fact, so well in 2021 that they were like the other MLS areas this year in 2022. They were down 30% when you're talking about north of the crosstown. I shouldn't say the connector, the crosstown. So down 30% north of the crosstown and down 22% in transactions south of the crosstown.
But the prices increased how?
The price south of the crosstown increased 13%. So you're getting up to a median sales price close to $900,000. And north of the crosstown jumped up 6.5%, not that much, less than the rest of the MLS, but getting over $600,000 now for a home north of the crosstown. Wagner Terrace area, that area.
There's so many things have increased. Hey, let's go ahead and take a trip over to West Ashley. What do we got over in West Ashley?
Well, West Ashley, like all other places, have done really well over the past few years. They're off about 20% this year in transactions. Again, the whole MLS is off about 20%. And so West Ashley is very similar in that way. West Ashley's prices gained a little bit more than the whole MLS. They gained about 19%, whereas the whole MLS gained about 14%. So I think people see value in West Ashley. It's less than the islands. It's less than James Island and Mount Pleasant.
Well, speaking of James Island, let's take a trip over there. What do you got for James Island? Why don't you share with us?
Very similar, about a 20% drop, actually about a 22% drop on James Island in the number of transactions. And the price went up, though, 23%. So, the islands always do well when the prices are going up. The prices of
since we're on James Island, let's go take a quick trip over to Folly Beach.
Let's see, Folly Beach. Let me look here. About a 15% drop in the number of transactions, so a little less. So that Folly Beach did fairly well last year and had a 32% increase in prices, which is a lot. That's a lot.
So 32% increase in price in Folly Beach. Is that the largest increase in the MLS in 2022?
Well, Kiowa had a 55.7% increase in prices. I think Kiowa was the highest, and Kiowa was about the biggest.
So Folly was the second highest.
Folly was right up there, yeah.
All right, let's go ahead and go over to Johns Island, and then we'll go out to Kiowa and Seabrook. So what does Johns Island look like? Johns
Island dropped about 15% in transactions, similar to the rest of the MLS, but went up 32% in price. That's one of the highest rises in prices as well. Johns Island became very, very popular, much more so than it was 4 or 5 years ago.
I consider Johns Island, Charleston, to this day still, even though it's been more populated recently, it's Charleston's last frontier.
Absolutely. And that's why it's taken a while for people to get over there. But the access has been made a little bit easier over the last few years. But now, because of all the influx of people, they're having some traffic problems over there. So,
well, let's take a trip down. Let's go down and go over to Kiowa. Can you elaborate a little bit about what you were talking about with Kiowa?
Well, like I said, the Kiowa prices went up dramatically. Last year, the median sales price in 2021 was under $1 million, and now it's almost 1.5 million. So,
are you getting tired yet? We're traveling all around pretty fast, aren't we?
Yeah.
Let's look at Seabrook. Do you believe in this adage? What goes Kiowa goes Seabrook?
Yes, to some degree. Seabrook prices aren't as high, and the volume is not as high on Seabrook as it is on Kiowa. But yeah, the supply on Seabrook over the past couple of years has been extremely low, and that will drive prices up. Again, and this is true of the entire Charleston area. The supply has a lot to do with the fact that we're continuing to have high prices.
Let's go back to Johns Island, and then let's go out to Waldenlaw. One thing that I heard, and tell me if this is correct, Waldenlaw is the only area in the MLS of Charleston that the price has actually gone up out there. The change of transactions have actually gone up. Is that correct?
Yes, but it's such a small market. In statistics, what we talk about is the size of the data set. And the data set at Waldenlaw is always very low. So in 2021, there were only 28 transactions. In 2022, there were 29. So
but the fact is that the prices went up, or the amount of transactions went up by 3.6%. Is that what I?
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's a small data set.
Yeah,
so
you're right.
One extra transactions, but the prices did go up out there about 28%.
Since we're talking about rural areas and out of the ways areas a little bit, let's go over to Edisto.
There are three MLS areas out there, Edisto Beach being the one with the biggest volume, and it was off 14% in transactions, so not quite as bad as the whole MLS, and only had a 10% increase in price.
Why do they break that down like that in Edisto? They don't do that in any other
islands. Actually, one of the MLS areas in Edisto is not in the Tri-County area. It's in Colleton County. Actually, two of the MLS areas are in Colleton County, I think, 27 and 28.
Appreciate you taking the time. Let's do a little bit more here and go out to, you don't have Walterboro in here, do you?
I do not. Actually, my mother-in-law lives in Walterboro. So Walterboro is one of those little small towns that, may not exactly reflect the rest of the United States as far as real estate goes. I think they're better off than they were. But Walterboro doesn't move very quickly, although I will say that there is a huge influx of money coming into Walterboro. I can't remember exactly what it was, but there was about a 500 job increase coming into the Walterboro, Colleton County area.
Do you concur with this, Doug, that the marketplace for the United States is very different in each area that somebody may talk about, whether it's California, Chicago, or Illinois, but for our area, it's always been pretty positive. We live in a fairly positive bubble, do we not?
Well, the coastal areas are always going to do better than most places when things go up. And so we have that going for us. All real estate's local, but the entire United States did pretty well in real estate the last couple of 3 years. It was a big boom in real estate everywhere. Is
this a fair statement that the first part of 2022 was really a carryover from 2021?
Absolutely it was. We still had very low mortgage rates. You could still get a mortgage for 3.5%, and we still had very little supply, and supply continued to go down after the beginning of 2021 well into the spring. Not until the interest rates started rising did we start to see inventory start to pick back up again.
Okay, so with that information delivered to us and knowing what 2021 was and knowing the first half of 2022 is pretty decent, what can we expect the first half of 2023 through your eyes?
Well, the crystal ball is always hard to see into. It's a little foggy, but I just got to think that the interest rates are going to be a big story through 2023. I think the Fed is going to continue to raise rates because the labor market is a big deal. people feel comfortable. They have their job, and they can go get another one if they want to. It's not hard to get a job. And so as long as the labor market's that strong, people are going to continue to spend money. And as long as people continue to spend money the way that they have been, you're going to see, that's demand. And there is a ton of demand, not only for houses, but for everything. They're buying, and that's 75% of our GDP is consumer spending. And so as long as they continue to buy, and they will as long as they still have a job, we're going to see some inflation. And it's going to take the Fed a while. If you remember back in 1980, when Paul Volcker was doing this to curb inflation back then, it took a couple of years. And it's a bad thing to say. And I heard this in a podcast, a Planet Money podcast the other day. But unfortunately, to get this to stop and to curb this inflation, people are going to have to lose their jobs. And the Fed is not against that. They are planning on it. That's the only way that they can get people to stop spending.
Is there any other solution? And I know you're not an expert at inflation, but losing jobs, is there any other options besides losing jobs?
I don't think so. If we all just quit spending, it would work. But people are not going to quit spending as long as they are very comfortable in their job and the fact that they can get another job.
Yeah. I got to tell you, man, I really appreciate you taking the time. But before we do actually leave, give us your golden wisdom. I tried to get it at the beginning of the podcast. I want to hear it again. Give us some wisdom of the besides the interest rate. You mentioned the interest rate, okay? But when it comes to transactions and the analytics involved in that, and your mind, the way you are, what's the biggest thing that happened last year that's different from any other year?
Well, again, you asked me not to go back to it, but I think it's the mortgage rates. The mortgage rate was the big change. Basically 2022 was 2 different years. The beginning of the year was the low interest rates.
Yeah, that's true.
And the high demand and the low supply. And as the year wore on and the interest rates went up, we saw a small decrease in the demand. We saw a decrease in the demand and an increase in the supply. Supply is now at almost 2,800 homes rather than 1,000, which it was in the spring of 2022. We have about 28 homes listed for sale on the MLS now.
Shouldn't that be a good thing for our marketplace, though? If the location is the most desirable location and you've got more variety, shouldn't that equivalent to a successful transactions?
Well, like I said, 19,000 transactions was not as good as last year, but it's still a very good year. 19,000 transactions, one of the top years we ever had. So that's the bright lining. But I think that 2022 is going to be less than that. I think we're going to 2023, excuse me. I think we're going to see a few less transactions. It's not going to be remarkable. It's going to be a slight drop in transactions from 2022.
Well, I just want to believe because there's more inventory there, there'll be more opportunity. When there's more opportunity, the transactions, I like what you said, they're going to go down, but not drastically going to go down.
I think that's right. I think it's still going to be a very good year compared to, what we had in the past. It's going to be higher than anything we had probably before 2015.
If anybody's listening to this that wants to have the opportunity to subscribe to your services, how can they do that, Doug?
Well, my services are available really only to real estate agents in the Charleston area. And so an agent in the Charleston area, if he wants to get these statistics, he can contact me or go to my website. Charleston Real Estate Stats is the name of the website. They can go there or they can contact me by email, doug27@kw.com. And I will sign them up for $12 a month. $12 a month is all it costs, and you can get all this information. You get emails, you get access to the website.
That's great. Doug, I told you early on that this is one of my more favorite podcasts to do because there's so much information. The information that you shared with us is phenomenal. So thanks for taking the time to do this, Doug. And I appreciate our relationship, and I appreciate you sharing what's inside your mind with my listeners. So thank you very much, Doug. Have a good 2023, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for watching Voice for Real Estate, where you meet local experts who provide timely information in every episode. Be sure to subscribe, share, and comment. Find Voice for Real Estate online at voiceforrealestate.com.